Dear friends, welcome to this new video. Today we're discussing a case of a fairly large macular hole for which we decided to perform an internal limiting membrane ILM flap. For ILM flaps and for macular holes in general, the goal is to perform as complete a vitrectomy as possible to ensure a good tamponade at the end. In this patient, the posterior vitreous detachment wasn't complete yet, so we induced it ourselves. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but there's a visible demarcation line in the periphery as we're lifting the posterior hyaloid. This gives us a truly complete vitrectomy, and if a retinal detachment occurs later, it helps avoid a situation where the hyaloid is still attached and rigid, which would make things much harder to manage. Once the vitreous is detached, we finish the peripheral vitrectomy without any particular difficulty. Then we move on to the ILM peeling. We stain the area with a blue dye and start the peel. We remove the nasal part completely, and we keep the temporal side to create the flap, which will be folded over the fovea. Why the temporal side? Simply because the infusion is placed temporally, and at the end of surgery, the airflow naturally pushes the flap toward the fovea. It's purely mechanical, so we keep the temporal part to help the flap fall into place on its own. We could have done the opposite by placing the infusion nasally, but it's harder to handle because of the nose, and you also avoid working across the interpapillomacular zone. Temporal is just more accessible overall. Now we've completed the nasal peel, we start the temporal side, leaving a small hinge around the fovea. We peel a little wider to give and gradually fold the flap toward the center. Sometimes you need to reinitiate the peel several times. It's not a natural movement. You often need to re-grab and redirect the membrane so the flap follows the intended trajectory. But in this case, we managed to create a clean flap without much trouble. We gently brought it over the fovea without losing it at any point. We then proceeded with the fluid-air exchange. And as expected, with the temporal infusion, the airflow softly pushed the flap toward the fovea. It helps improve the chances of hole closure compared to a standard ILM peel. I used SF6 at the end, as I usually do for macular holes. Aside from that, nothing special in this case. ILM flaps are a great technique for large macular holes. The other option would be to use an amniotic membrane graft, but that's more complex, more technical, and can shift post-operatively. The ILM flap remains simple, reproducible, and generally very effective. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you very soon for the next one.